right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one, and I'm not going to waste no time. I'm going to get straight into it because it's late. I'm frustrated. This didn't come to me earlier in the day like I had hoped it would. Things happen, though. You know, I was hoping to get this out earlier so that I could get you guys out in Inner Demons as well. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. We'll see. If it doesn't, I'll try double extra hard tomorrow to get out an Inner Demons to you guys. You know, I'm moving so fast that I just slapped the thumbnail together real quick just to get something up. But, you know, I'll address that tomorrow. I'll make sure my curb appeal is up to par tomorrow. Anyways, this story right here is about a couple of individuals that you guys have heard several stories about coming from me. And I'm sure you've heard several stories about these same individuals on other channels. You know, these are individuals that were in the mix. Obviously, they're you know, these guys are heavily involved in a lot of the politics. They're leaders. So two of them you guys have heard about, and that's Turtle from Ontario, and then you got Wino from La Rana, my good friend. So those two individuals are involved in this story. And then the third one that I haven't really ran a story about, I haven't really talked about, I'm sure a lot of you know, is Turi from Cucas. And he's in bad standings. So, you know, the choice of words that were conveyed to me when this story was told, they're not my choice of words. They're somebody else's. It is what it is. You know, I don't know Turi. I've heard things about him, everything that I've heard about him in the past, you know, when he was functioning, as far as I was told in the past, he was somebody that was well respected. He was somebody that obviously had a lot of status. I know he was in Corcoran for a while. He was up in the Bay. And, you know, the only thing that I remember hearing about Turi is that, you know, like a lot of the Grejetas, a couple of them, I'm not sure exactly which ones, but they're into the Aztec gods. You know, religiously. I remember seeing a poem or something to that effect that Turi had wrote that was addressed to his people, but he flipped it in the way it was written. It was about some Aztec gods, and it was written like it was coming from leadership. But I heard a couple of the Grejetas were into that stuff like religiously, like they were really into it, to where, you know, they almost practically prayed to these Aztec gods. Anyways, so let me get into this story. It's a good one, but again, the common thread is dope, carga, and you know, that's the common theme with a lot of these stories. But this one right here has a cold twist at the end. And again, you can see where the priorities are at. So anyway, this story right here, it happened sometime in the early 2000s. I want to say 2000, 2001. And at that time, Turi was in Chino. He was in Chino. He was in Palm Hall. And at the time, I believe he was doing a parole violation. If you guys remember the previous story that I told you guys, from what I've been told, Chino was like, you know, the reception center for parolees, or they sent a lot of parolees there to Chino. And Palm Hall was the spot where they sent everybody that was validated. You know, that part of it's not clear to me. I don't know if Chino was like the reception center, but I do know that a lot of guys that, you know, were validated, that, you know, they were doing parole violations, they would end up in Chino in Palm Hall. So whether it was a reception center, whether they got transferred there later, I don't know. But nonetheless, Turi was there in 2000, 2001, sometime around that time. So one of my previous stories, if you guys remember, I mentioned an individual by the name of Gary Ramirez. He was over there in Chino at the same time. Turtle was over there with the other 9 brothers that were over there. And Gary was the one that hit Little Man from Whittier as a bottle for them. I don't know if he raised his hand or if it was something that they just, you know, they had him do. But he's the one that hit Little Man from Whittier. And the one thing, I don't know if I mentioned this in that story, that last story, but Little Man was a C. He was a Mexican Mafia member. He either sold drugs for him, he assisted with collecting taxes, or he worked with crews that were operating in his area. But he was somebody that always respected the Mexican Mafia. He was somebody that was always there, always assisted. And he was somebody that the Mexican Mafia held in high regards. Also, if you guys remember, I told you that when he hit Little Man from Whittier, the C's that were there actually put him up, you know, to be made. But Sana shot it down for the reasons that I already told you guys about. The other thing about Gary is he was also a major plug. He was a point of contact for the Mexican Mafia. A lot of members that would get out would hook up with him on the streets because he had connections. He knew people. He knew how to get in touch with certain people. So he was like a street plug out there. He always had dope. He always had guns. He was somebody that they would get at, when they needed a point of contact. So at some point, Turi, he ends up paroling. This is around 2001. He paroles, he gets out, and I guess it's dry out there. It's so dry that he ends up getting in touch with Gary, and he tells Gary, he's like, "Hey, I need some dope. I need you to hook me up with some dope. It's dry out here in the Inland Empire. I can't find nothing." He's like, "Can you hook me up?" At that time, Gary had a good, solid connection that was plugging him in. This was somebody that was consistent. Even when it was dry out there, this dude always had dope. So even though Gary didn't care for Turi, he didn't like him on a personal level, even though he didn't like him, he didn't care for the dude, he still respected him based on the fact that he was a Mexican mafia member. So he tells Turi, he's like, "I'll hook you up, bro. I got you." He's like, "I'm not even going to make nothing off it. I'll give it to you straight across," meaning that he wasn't going to make no profit, that he was going to give it to him, for what the connection was giving it to him for. He wasn't going to make no money off him. Gary, he tells Turi, "I'm getting it for 180 an ounce." He's like, that's what I'm going to give it to you for. Exactly what I get it for. So, shoot over, bro. I got you. So Gary calls his boy and he tells him, "Hey, I need a pedazo, like ASAP. I need it right now. This dude, one of my boys, he's in a hurry. Can you come drop it off, like, as soon as you can?" So his boy's like, "Yeah, I'll be over there right now." So he shoots over there, he drops it off, and then he leaves. Gary's whole thing is that he didn't want Turi to get there around the same time as his connection got there, them two end up bumping heads, and then Turi trying to do something scandalous, like, take him for himself or try to burn the dude or something like that. I guess Turi had a bad reputation for doing things like that. So that's what he was trying to avoid. Just trying to avoid them two crossing paths. This connection was somebody that had been treating Gary good. So, essentially he was looking out for the dude. Not only that, but this guy was one of Gary's main pipelines. So he wanted to keep this guy insulated for selfish reasons. So while all this was going on, Gary was there with one of his boys, Belon from Long Beach. They're there in the kitchen. They're kicking back. They're drinking beer. Turi shows up, and then they go to the kitchen. So they go in the kitchen. They sit at the table, and at some point, Gary pulls the ounce out, and he gives it to Turi. He gives it to him. So they're there. They're talking. They're drinking, chopping it up, and Turi, he goes through all the motions. He smells it. He looks at it, opens it up. And then he asked Gary if he's got a scale. I don't know if Gary took that as a lightweight, as lightweight disrespect, but this is supposed to be one of his boys. I don't know. I know I got that understanding with a lot of my boys. They come to drop something off, depending on who it is, I'm not gonna break out no scale. Their word is gold to me. So at any rate, he asked Gary if he's got a scale. Gary comes back, he goes in the other room, comes back out with one of them little pocket scales. He's like, "Here, bro, weigh that shit." You know what I mean? It's all there. If anything, there's a little bit more. There's a little extra. This cat is a straight up dude. My connection, he's solid. He's never short. And if anything, he always puts a little bit extra in there. So anyway, Turi weighs it. It's all there. So they're kicking back. They're drinking beer. Turi stays for about another 15, 20 minutes. When Turi decides it's time for him to cut tread, he shakes Gary's hand, he shakes Belon's hand. So as Turi's walking towards the front door, Gary, he peeps the whole move. He sees what Turi's trying to do, but he ain't going for it. Gary tells him, "Hey, bro, you forgot to pay me for the dope. It's not free. I paid for that out of my pocket. Like I told you on the phone, I'm not making a dime out of this, bro. That's what he gives it to me for. I get it for 180, and that's what I'm giving it to you for." Most people probably wouldn't have said nothing, and I'm sure that's what Turi was used to. But again, Gary wasn't going for it. He was well aware of Turi's get down. He knew that this was just one of his little power plays that he was trying to pull. But Gary was somebody that, even though he wasn't a C, he had been around enough Mexican mafia members to understand how the game worked, and he was like, "Nah, bro, he wasn't going for it." So, he expects Turi to pay the money that he owes him. Turi, he's used to using his status, in situations like this. He's used to using his status for personal gain. And the fact that, Gary isn't going for it and is, expects to get paid for it, he's upset because, I'm Big Turi, you know what I'm saying? And, I shouldn't have to pay for clavo because of who I am. But again, Gary wasn't going for it. Gary even went as far as telling Turi, he's like, look, bro, he's like, I'll call my connection back right now. I'll have him come over here and, I'll let you explain to him who you are. And if he wants to let you keep that dope, he's like, hey, that's on him. Again, these are not my words, but apparently Turi being upset, he started acting like a little girl. He was upset that he had to pay Gary back, but he ended up paying him back. He ended up paying him back. He probably stomped out of there, probably slammed the door and kicked the dog on his way out. I guess he was butthurt because he wasn't getting the kind of rock star status that he was accustomed to getting. I know a lot of NF members that used to be like that. They used to be, you guys already know too. Lencho is a prime example. That's an individual that used to do the same type of shit. He would use his status as a means, for personal gain. He would use the NF title as a way to manipulate situations, to either get dope or get cars or guns or money out of the young homies, because a lot of the young homies, they respect the fact that he was an NF member. And it's the same way with the Mexican mafia. It's the same way. The youngsters out there in Southern California, they admire these guys. They look up to them. A lot of them, they got nothing but the utmost amount of respect for him. So they'll bend over backwards for him, do whatever whatever they ask him to do. So, guys like Turi, Lencho, they use their status, to manipulate situations like this. Keep in mind, Gary and Turi, they weren't close either. This was probably the second time that they had interacted together. I think they had done business on 2 other occasions. Gary knew that Turi was a C because, those types of things get around. Gary had done a lot of time. So, just by doing time, you're in the mix, you're in the thick of the politics, you know who's who, you hear about it. That kind of stuff, it gets around. So now fast forward to around 2002, 2003. So Charlie Chats from Clover, Turtle from Ontario, Wino from La Rana, and Turi from Cucas, they're right there in Chino. All 4 of them are right there in Chino. They're all in Palm Hall. They're all doing parole violations. So over there in Palm Hall, the second tier on the east side is like, the headquarters for the Southerners. That's their headquarters over there. They got all the cells on that tier except for the last 2 cells. Those 2 cells were saved for the Crips. They put Crips in those 2 cells. At that time, Charlie celled up with his boy Pelon. They might even have got busted together. But they're celled up together, and they're on the back bar of the second tier, right next to the last 2 cells. So every cell in front of them to their left, those are all their cells. On their right, to their right, are the 2 Crip cells. So the second tier on the east side of Palm Hall, that's considered the Southern headquarter tier. That's their tier right there. They got all the cells on that tier, but the last 2 cells. Those last 2 cells, they had Crips in those 2 cells. So Charlie and Pelon, they're in the 3rd cell from the end. Basically, on their right are the 2 Crip cells. To their left, you got Turtle and Wino. They're a couple cells down. They're probably like 3 or 4 cells down. And then Turi, he's all the way up in the front, on the front bar. So he's kind of way up there by himself, and everybody else is in the back. You got a lot of other, other Sureños and some of their other soldiers that are on that tier. But Turi, he's stuck way up there in the front by himself. So one of the Crips that had just touched down on the tier, he gets there, and they see him come in, and about 20 minutes later, after he lands on the tier, he bangs on Charlie's wall. He bangs on the wall, and he's like, hey, I got a one-time for you. He's like, down low. For those of you that don't know what a one-time is, it means a wheeler, a kite. He had something for him. He wanted to get at him about something. So Charlie goes down, he grabs the kite. So he reads it, and the Crip tells him, he's like, hey, look, man, I just came from CRC. He's like, I got 9 grams of black, got 9 grams of Cataga. He's like, look, I'll give it all up for, some cigarettes and some warichi, some coffee. And I'm sure Charlie and his celly were like, damn, jackpot, we just hit payday. 9 grams. That's a good little amount of dope, behind the walls. So, and all they want is coffee and cigarettes. But that's like the best thing that could possibly happen, especially if you're somebody that uses dope. These guys come in and they got 9 grams and they're willing to give it up for coffee and cigarettes. Hell yeah. So they're probably already thinking, man, everybody gonna have to scrape up all their coffee and all their flowers if they want to get loaded. They're gonna have to, everybody gonna have to scrape up and put this together, man, so we can make this happen. So what Charlie does is he does what he's supposed to do. He gets at, he gets at Wino and he's like, hey, brother, he's like, this Crip right here just got at me. He just came from CRC and he's basically telling me that he's got 9 grams that he's willing to trade for, some cigarettes and some coffee. Is it okay if I make the trade with them? Because a lot of times, man, there's rules, there's protocols that you got to follow. You can't just conduct business with anybody, especially if you're functioning and you're part of an organization, or you're functioning up under somebody else's household. There's policies, there's rules, procedures, there's things like that they got to follow. So Charlie was covering himself. He was covering himself. He was asking Wino if it's okay to conduct business, to go ahead and run this transaction with this Crip. And he waits a couple minutes and he yells down to Wino and he's like, hey, is it cool to go ahead and do that? And Wino's like, bro, I thought you were down there already. Like, hurry up and pick that shit up. So they end up getting together some tobacco. They get some Warichi. They put it all together. And whatever it was, they make the trade and everybody's happy. The Africanos are happy and these guys are happy. The whole back bar just dipped out to the land of euphoria. Not yet. They're all about to get loaded and they're going to be happy, at least for, however long it takes for them to run through these 9 grams. But here's the kicker. When the Crips sent the 9 grams to Charlie and Pelon, they sent that directly to Wino and Turtle, like they were supposed to. That's another protocol right there. It's another policy that I'm sure, it's like that across the board. With the ABs, it would be like that with us as well. If there's some Norteños or some Northerners that are conducting a transaction like that, and they get at me and they ask me, hey, B, is it cool if we run this transaction? I probably would have done it myself and would have told them to take a back seat. But being that they took care of it, when that package came to them, they're not at liberty to bust it open. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They got it when they got it from the Cribs and they shot it straight to Wino and Turtle. So Wino and Turtle, they get it. And from that point on, whatever they decided to do with it, that's their business. They're the ones that are running that household. So they sent a chunk back to Charlie and Pelon. They sent them their little cut. And then, they touched a couple of their soldiers and some of their other homies on the tier. Whoever they felt like, was deserving enough to get some, they shot it out. They divvied it up. Turi didn't get none. Wino didn't care for Turi. They never liked each other, so Turi didn't get shit. Matter of fact, from what I was told, the entire time that Turi was there, he never even spoke a word to Wino and Turtle. They never even communicated with each other. And these are brothers. These are carnals. All these guys are brothers, but they never spoke. That's how bad the blood was between them. So about a week or two later, after they got these 9 grams, and I'm sure by then it was long gone, Charlie Selly, he ends up paroling, and Wino and Turtle, they end up catching a chain to the bay. They get shipped out to Pelican Bay, so they're gone. And now Charlie, he's in the cell by himself. So now Charlie's by himself. Turtle and Wino, they're gone. They bounced. And whether it was by default or, through some kind of process, Turi, he ends up taking control of Palm Hall at that time. So he's got the llaves now. He's running it. So a couple of days after Turtle and Wino, after they caught the chain to Pelican Bay, another Sureño ends up moving on the tier. He comes in and he sells up with Charlie. And this was somebody that was from his area on the streets. They didn't know each other, but, being that they were both from the same area, it was like, this is one of his little homies. So, it kind of worked out. But the following day, after this guy moves in with Charlie, he gets up and he takes off on Charlie. So he takes off on Charlie and they're going at it. Now, Charlie's 40 years old. He's 40 years old. You know, he's an older guy. He's skinny. He's not in the best of shape. But Charlie's a YA baby. He's a YA baby, and he still got hands. He ended up beating the brakes off this youngster. Put tips on him. That youngster touched shit in that cell he didn't even know was there. So Turi, he hears it. He hears it. And he hears this Sureño getting hands put on him. Turi yells down to Charlie and he tells him, hey, that's enough, bro. He's like, that's enough. I'll get at you tomorrow on the yard. So, you know, I'm sure at that point, Charlie's like, man, what the fuck's going on? You know what I'm saying? And who knows if the youngster told him that he had directives to do it. Probably. You know, when you're in the cell with somebody and a situation like that takes place, a lot of the times what'll happen is either that individual that's told to take off on his celly, he'll end up bonding with that guy and it won't happen. Or, you know, in this situation, I could see that it would happen. And because they still had to live with each other, at the end of the day, you know, they cleaned up the cell after they threw blows in there. I'm sure they started talking on some level. I'm sure Charlie might have asked him, like, hey, bro, you know, what's up with that? Why'd you do that? You know, who knows if the youngster told him. But at any rate, so they go to the yard the next day. And again, I'm sure Charlie, you know, even going to the yard was like, man, you know, what's going to happen now? These fools going to move on me on the yard. But, you know, Charlie wasn't somebody that was going to check in like that. He'd been around too long. Like I said, he was 40 years old. He had been in the mix for a while. So he goes out to the yard. He goes out there and, you know, Turi, he pulls him over and he's like, hey, bro, I'm going to let you know right now, that was a check. You know what I mean? That was a check. And the reason why I had you check like that is for putting, you know, you putting yourself above a carnal. He told him what you did was foul. And Charlie was like, what are you talking about? He was like, hey, bro, he's like, when these Africanos came in, I got at the two brothers that were right there a couple cells down from me. I did what I was supposed to do. What was I supposed to do? Send a line all the way down there and get at you? He's like, I got at them. And, you know, when those Crips shot that package to me, I shot it to your brothers. I shot it to Wino and Turtle. And that's what I was supposed to do. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? He's like, you know, if you had an issue with it, why didn't you jam those brothers up when they were still here? You know, Charlie's he's upset that he had this youngster take off on him, understandably so. That was all personal. It should have never happened. But, you know, this is an example of how Turi was using his status to abuse his people. And this is why he ultimately ended up getting caught up for situations like this right here. So there's nothing Charlie can do about it but chalk it up. He can't do nothing about it. I'm sure he didn't like Turi even more after that incident. But, you know, it is what it is. There's nothing he can do about it. So at some point, they all end up paroling. Charlie, Wino, Turtle, they all end up getting out around the same time. Turi even got out around that same time. So they get out and, you know, good news travels. However, it got filtered out to Wino and Turtle. They heard about that incident and they wanted to get the details. You know, they wanted to know what happened. So they made plans to meet up with Charlie. They made plans to meet up with them. They drive out somewhere. They make arrangements to meet. And so Charlie sits him down. He tells him, hey, look, this is what happened. As soon as you guys left, this is what happens. This youngster moves in with me. Next thing you know, we're talking. This fool, he tries to snake me. So I put tips on him. I beat the brakes off this youngster, right? So, you know, the next day, come to find out, this all happened behind Turi. He called himself checking me because I gave you guys that dope and he didn't get none. He said that I was putting myself above a carnal because I got dope and he didn't. Bottom line is he was butthurt because he didn't get touched and he took it out on Charlie. When Wino hears this, he's fucking livid. He's furious. He's like, are you fucking kidding me? He's like, this motherfucker. You know, that's the one thing that's a little bit different about the Mexican mafia and the NF. You know, even when there's cutthroat, dirty politics, something like this right here, even when it's the most egregious, you know, the worst situation possible, with the NF, you can't just go and kill another C without getting it cleared. It's gotta go through a vote. Only certain individuals would be authorized to do something like that. But it seems like, it's a little bit different with the Mexican mafia. Although, unless you're talking about something off the books. If there's a personal issue, and I know that there's a dirty NF member out there, like a Lencho, and I'm with another C, and we both hate this dude, we can go knock this dude off the books where nobody knows about it. But if they find out it was us and it wasn't reported, we get in trouble. But I don't know if it's different with the Mexican mafia, if they can just do something like that, or if they have to get it cleared. I was always under the impression that they had to get something like that, authorized. It had to come from up top. They had to sign off on it. But I don't know. Anyways, it's beside the point. It's really irrelevant to the story. So after the meeting, after Charlie sits Turtle and Wino down, after they talk and he explains everything to him, Turtle, he cuts out, and then Wino and Charlie, they jump in another car, and there's another individual that's a Mexican mafia member that's driving. So he's one of Wino's boys. Anyway, so they drive back to East LA and they drop off Charlie. They drop him off and then they cut out. But before Wino cuts out, he tells Charlie, he's like, hey, brother, you know what? On behalf of my so-called brother, he's like, I apologize that happened to you. I'm sorry you had to go through that. That wasn't your fault. You bore no responsibility for anything that happened. That was some lame shit that happened. And basically, Turi, he did that because he was butthurt. And, that's our business. I'm giving you my word that it's going to be taken care of. But I admire the fact that, you kept it pushing. You went out to the yard. You've always been solid, so I appreciate you. Hey, real quick, let me make something clear. Let me just clarify something, just in case anybody gets confused or I didn't make this clear in the beginning part of the story. So the only role that Gary Ramirez played in the story was in the very beginning when Turi goes by his house. Gary buys the ounce of black for him, and Turi don't want to pay. And Gary basically tells him, hey, you got to pay. You got to pay. That money came out of my pocket. At that point, after that transaction and after Turi left, Gary Ramirez was out of the story. So if I mention, Gary later on in the story in place of Charlie, that's wrong. Because like I told you guys, you fast forward a couple of years to 2002, 2003, that's when Turi would end up in Palm Hall now with Charlie, Turtle, Wino, and whoever else was there in Palm Hall. So I just want to make sure that there's no confusion there. Gary and Charlie are two different individuals. So anyways, the other thing too is when Charlie was there in Palm Hall and, after his celly took off on him and then he goes to the yard the next day and then Turi approaches him and he tells him, look, the reason why that happened is because I had you checked. The other thing that he told him is that, he tells him, don't go crying to Wino and Turtle. Don't go crying to them about what happened because I'm going to be getting at them as well. He made it seem like he was the bigger, he was the C that had more status than these two guys. Needless to say, he never got at him. He never got at Turtle. He never got at Wino. He made it seem like he was going to reprimand them for what they did by putting Charlie in that cross, but it never happened. So fast forward. Now, this is when they drop off Charlie. So when they drop Charlie off, Wino, he tells his boy, the guy that's driving, the nameless individual, he tells him, he's like, hey, bro, he's like, do you know anybody that's close to Turi? Anybody that's on his team that's real close to him? And apparently his boy knew somebody that he was in courtroom with. He knew somebody that was from Cucamonga Dog Patch. And yeah, I know I probably fucked that up, but it is what it is, man. So he tells him, he's like, he's a solid dude. I got a line to him if you want me to get at him. So Wino tells him, like, yeah, get at him, bro. So Wino's boy is like, what do you want me to tell him? So Wino tells him, he's like, look, tell him that one of the camaradas that was out there, tell him he was out there in that area and, he got at this paisa. This paisa was slinging dope and, he was trying to buy some dope and the paisa got loud with him. So the homie slapped him up, took his dope and took his money. And that basically we want to find out, we want to make sure that this paisa isn't paying Turi, that this isn't somebody that he's taxing. Because if it is, then, we want to bless him. We want to give him his issue. So Wino tells his boy, look, he's like, get some clean IDs, get a clean credit card, get a rental car, and make sure it's got clean plates, get everything all situated. At that time, Wino apparently had somebody in pocket, a relative or somebody that was a manager at a rental place out there. And on occasion, they would get rental cars from that specific lot, and it would be done using a fake credit card. So Wino told him to get a car, get a fake credit card, get some IDs, some good fake IDs, get everything set up. They were basically getting ready to go see Turi. So then they drive out to Cucamonga and they get a hotel room using a fake credit card. So the plan was to lure Turi out under the pretenses of that. They had some dope and some money that they took from this paisa, and they wanted to make Turi believe that this paisa was probably somebody that was paying him. So this was his people, meaning that he some of that dope and some of that money belonged to him, rightfully so. So that was the plan. So Wino has his boy call this other cat from Dog Patch, and when he calls, he's like, "Hey, I'm calling, about what I previously talked to you about. I need to get some of this money and some of this dope to Turi." And when he called, Turi just so happened to be with him. They're driving around together, and Wino and his boy come up with the fictitious name of some paisa that they supposedly robbed, took his money, took his dough, but there is no paisa. This is just a fictitious character that they came up with. And as soon as they, dropped the name on the phone, it's like, yeah, this paisa, his name was such and such. Right when they said that, Turi's like, yep, that guy, he's one of my guys. He's up under my umbrella. I want a third of that off top. So just as they expected, again, not my words, greedy bastard. So they're like, you know what? Yeah, it's all good. We got you. So they make arrangements. They make arrangements where to meet up with Turi and his boy. They make arrangements, and they tell him, look, it's going to take us about 45 minutes to get there, but we'll meet you at whatever location they gave them. So they're like, cool. Mind you, again, that paisa never existed. That just goes to show you, how dirty Turi was. He's seen an opportunity to get some free dough, some free money. These are supposed to be his brothers. He's supposed to be on the up and up with these guys. This is mafia business. And he straight out lied to him. They set a trap, and he bit. They threw some bait out there and he bit. And it confirmed in their minds that he's foul. So they make plans to meet him. And like I said, their whole game plan was to kill him. So they're driving to this agreed to location. And at some point, the youngster that's with Turi, he calls and he's like, hey, man, I'm sorry. He's like, we're on our way. We got caught up in some traffic. We're running a little bit behind. We'll be there in about 30 minutes. And, while they're talking, Turi, he asked the cat that he's with to ask this other guy. He's like, ask him if he's ever worked with Wino or if he works under Wino. And that gets relayed back to him. He's like, yeah, I know who Wino is. And yeah, I've worked with him before. As soon as they heard that, they knew right then and there. They knew that not only was Turi a greedy bastard, but he was also a coward, a scary bastard. Turi put two and two together and he figured it out. Whatever made him figure it out, whatever made him come to his senses, he figured it out, and he was like, you know what? He was like, just turn around. We're not going to meet these cats. So Wino, he tells his boy, he's like, you know what? He's coward and he's greedy. But the one thing I will give him credit for is he's got good instincts. And Turi's instincts saved his life that day. This is one of those stories, though, again, it just makes you think. It makes you think. It just goes to show you how dirty politics can be, internal politics. A lot of this is internal Mexican mafia business. But it just goes to show you that, again, you're talking about heroin, black. Again, that's the common theme. A lot of these stories, it all involves dope. And that's the priority. And it's sad because a lot of us that get involved in this game, a lot of us that end up going to prison, we end up becoming, addicts at a young age. This is something that some of us are born into, but the one thing, though, it's sad, man. It's sad when you think about it, because a lot of us, before before a lot of us went to prison, you know, we ended up becoming addicted to heroin at some point in our childhoods, you know, at a young age, and it became a staple in our lives. You know, for years you're fighting this addiction, and it makes you do foul shit. You know, it makes you do foul shit. And the crazy part about it though is, you know, the Mexican mafia, they have an open door drug policy when it comes to hardcore drugs, heroin, meth. They're allowed to do it. You know, the NF, these are the reasons why the NF forbids habit forming drugs, because it creates these, you know, these dope fiend mentalities. It makes you do foul shit, and you know, makes you disregard your responsibilities, the rules, the policies, all that shit goes wayside. Anyways, like Wino said, Turi's instincts saved his life that day. Later on, Turi would end up falling into bad standings with the Mexican mafia. So, you know, he's no longer a part of that organization. But this is one situation that, you know, almost took him out the game. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this story right here. I got another one for you guys. I'm going to try to get it out to you tomorrow. Like I said, I will try my hardest to get an Inner Demons out to you guys tomorrow. And I will fix that thumbnail tomorrow. I'll make sure that my curb appeal is popping like the rest of them. Anyways, with that being said, this your boy B, and I'm out.